Hi, Nick here, founder of Functional Neuro Health. What I'm going to talk about today is one of the buzzwords that's going around health, and thank God it is. But the concept and the question that we're going to ask is, does breathwork work? The honest answer to that question is, it depends. Thankfully, through the rise of social media, one of the perks of that is the spread of a lot of good information, also a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and missing bits of information. So there is a lot of awareness out there of practices such as breathwork, which are ancient, which if you look into the ancient traditions of Qigong and other martial arts and yogic practices, they've been around for a long, long, long time. But there's this huge explosion of breathwork, which is awesome. But it's not one size fits all. And why is that? Because ultimately, especially from a neurologic perspective, breath equals input. Your brain is processing input all the time, constantly. Breathing, sight, sound, touch, emotions, physical sensations from within the body are all sending input, information back up to the brain so it can process that and hopefully choose the appropriate output. How many inputs does the brain get of breath per day? Between 20 to 25,000 reps or inputs, breaths per day. So constantly we're getting that input go into the brain. So when we decide to choose to do breath work, the depends is based on what type of input is already going into the brain, how the brain is processing it, which will usually be showed in the output. I'll give you an example. For instance, if we see someone is a fast breather, they're technically called a hyperventilator. It's not, but there's this constant hyperventilation, which is fast breathing. So they're probably breathing closer to 25,000 breaths per day. So more breaths equals more stress. More breaths, more fast, more rapid, more up into the rib cage equals more stress. Now, that individual that's breathing more inputs, more process, obviously their brain is perceiving threat. Okay, this perceiving threat from the environment, the output is that we're going to breathe faster, and it's this continual loop that goes around. The output also dictates the input, so it's this constant loop. So we get more stressed, we breathe more, we breathe faster, we breathe more into the chest and into the neck. That's why a lot of neck issues are caused from poor breathing dysfunction. Now, we're stressed, right? We're feeling stressed, we're feeling anxious. We may have come from a history of trauma, but what we're doing is we go to a breathwork class where it's that big kind of shamanic, fast breathing, holotropic breathwork. Amazing practice, but if done at the wrong time, where there's already a lot of big breaths, there's already a lot of perceived threat, that individual's nervous system is already feeling unsafe. We go into that environment, we're feeling vulnerable, and then we start to breathe fast. It's going to increase the stress inputs to the brain in that moment. And unless you're held properly or you know how to let go, the output is actually going to be worse. So in that moment, the depends is client is already, or you are already stressed. Breathing fast is going to create more stress. If you're already stressed, you're breathing fast. In a nutshell, we need to breathe less, lighter through the diaphragm. In the relationship of the breath biomechanically, if the diaphragm is deficient, it's usually because we're inhaling more. When we inhale more, we tend to use our neck, our sternocleidomastoid, our scalenes, and sometimes our traps and even our lats to actually breathe and lift the ribcage. Every time that ribcage is lifted, it further amplifies and triggers the sympathetic nerves out of the back of the spine. So there's this constant feedback loop. So we need to do the opposite. Now, again, depends. Someone is already breathing fast, they're in an anxious state. Breathing fast could, most of the time, make them worse. But in some occasions, again, depends, If they push through that, it will actually have a balancing effect. But you don't know until you do it yourself, and you have to have the properly trained professionals to guide people through this stuff. So for instance, now we say, okay, so we should just do slow breathing then, should we? Yes, but depends. Some people who really need that slow breathing, if we introduce slow breathing, that is also going to be perceived as a threat, and the output is there. If people already have primitive reflexes such as like the startle reflex is triggering threat, the startle reflex creates an inverted breathing pattern. A normal breathing pattern is when you inhale, the spine extends. And when you exhale, the spine flexes. If the startle response, which is a primitive reflex that should have disappeared by 6 to 12 months, is still active as an adult, they will have an inverse breathing pattern. So when they breathe in, instead of extending, they will flex. So now when I do that, if you just play around there, if you're just standing there and you breathe in and you extend and then you breathe out and you flex, that feels natural, right? Now try the opposite. Breathe in, breathe out. I actually can feel when I do that then, that created a sense of anxiety. So these people, and a lot of more people than you think, have the startle reflex on, but then we're going to do breath work. What do you think is going to happen? Threat, 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 threat. Worse, 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 worse. Okay? So, breath work, it solves a lot of things, but it's about doing it in the right sequence. You can't outbreathe a reflex. You can't outbreathe a reflex. If there was a correction, it would have been incidental. So the system is always self-corrective anyway, and so we can have spontaneous healing reactions. It happens all the time. In my work as a functional neurology practitioner, we are getting super specific about, okay, what's going on? What's actually driving it? What's driving the threat? The threat is the biggest trigger as to why breath work may or may not work. If the client is ready to receive, they're feeling safe, right? They're feeling safe, then breathing will work. But if they've always been a hyperventilator, we then need to do slow breathing for a period of time. If someone is lacking in energy, lacking in vitality, that's when that faster breath work is better, because it does activate the sympathetic response. So in a nutshell, fast equals stress. That's how the brain sees it. Slow equals safe. Fast equals stress, slow equals safe, according to the brain. Okay? So, in saying that, how do we know how to assess this? Well, that's exactly what we teach in our practitioner programs. One of the first things we look at is primitive reflexes and how they impact the breath. We also look at the nerve that is innervating the diaphragm itself, and we often have to take that off spasm because people have been over-breathing, and that nerve, the phrenic nerve, becomes locked in spasm. So every breath they take, they're actually further triggering spasm or stretching the nerve. And there's one thing that nerves don't like. They don't like to be compressed. They don't like to be stretched, which is why sometimes things like yoga can actually flare things up. Anyway, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but everything connects to everything. Breathing is the most physiologically important input that the brain has. So with that being said, how and what, where and when we do breath work with the individual based off their level of threat will determine what you do. At some point in the client's journey, if they're trying to heal their nervous system, they're going to have to do breath work and retrain their breathing. If you do that, a lot of things take care of themselves. But if there are high-level threat systems like the startle response or the fear paralysis or something like that, then there can be an issue. So, this is why we do what we do in the way we do. We assess the client's individual nervous system based on its own merit, based on their unique history, based on what they've been through, what they have responded to, what they haven't responded to, and then we do our assessments and we only correct the inputs or improve more processing power, and then if it's safe, we can do things like breath work. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to learn more, below I've got the Neuro Practitioner Blueprint training. I've also got the training on the functional neurology of breathing mechanics, so if you want to sign up for that, jump into that. And upcoming, we're going to do a training on how the primitive reflexes specifically affect the breathing mechanism. But what my mission is here is to create the highest level and most specific knowledge around the nervous system, because yes, how awesome, there's a lot more awareness around breathing and nutrition and diet and nervous system, but there is a lot of nuance that's being missed, okay? So pay attention. Pay attention. If you don't pay attention, you can miss things, you can make things worse. With our approach, we try to look at things through all those angles so the client and their nervous system gets the best chance to heal. Thanks for following. Make sure you like and share and jump into the trainings below if you want to find out more. Thank you. Have a great day.